The great Manny Pacquiao is at it again, taking on a guy 11 years his junior and who just happens to be the #1 welterweight in the world. That man is undefeated Errol Spence, a fighter who likes to inflict maximum damage on his opponents by murdering their bodies, which is the worst style a 42-year-old fighter wants to encounter. Then again, Manny Pacquiao is no ordinary fighter. Consider that he broke into the international scene on June 2001. That was pre-9/11. Since then, Pacquiao has fought the cream of the crop through 2 George W. Bush terms, 2 Obama terms, the Trump era, and currently through Joe Biden's meandering first term. This is in sharp contrast to his contemporary, Floyd Mayweather, who since their 2015 clash has fought perennial contender Andre Berto, an Irishman with no professional boxing bouts, a Japanese midget, and now a YouTuber. One can assume that Mayweather will be picking his next opponent from Pornhub's deep talent pool. That is, of course, right after he comes back from the barbershop. He looked good enough against the younger Bradley, Jesse Vargas, and Adrian Broner. In those fights, Pacquiao dictated the pace, hurt or dropped his opponents, and coasted to decision wins. Even in his controversial loss against Australian strongman Jeff Horn, Pacquiao's gas tank stood up to the dirty tactics and he managed to carve up his opponent's face. In his prime, Pacquiao was one of the best conditioned fighters in the world, and I dare say of all time. Not only was his attack voluminous, but he threw it with power. His non-stop movement and footwork were equally as impressive. The man was a ball of dynamism, and on the rare times in which fighters managed to resist his attacks, Pacquiao's gas tank ensured that he never stopped trying to knock him out. Consider the Miguel Cotto fight, one of his most significant victories. There, the tough and bigger Cotto attempted to bust Pacquiao up by hitting whatever he could find. For the first 3.5 rounds, Cotto was right there with Pacquiao. Then, the Filipino turned the pace up, twice dropping Cotto. The Puerto Rican gave it one last shot in the 5th round before deciding to stay on the defensive. Cotto did his best to survive Pacquiao's onslaught, but the referee intervened in the last round. That fight took place on November 2009, a glorious time in which Pacquiao had the ability to take his offense to another level and overwhelm his foes. Compare that to the Thurman fight 10 years later. Thurman started off quick, trying to bully the older fighter by backing him up. Then, as usual, Pacquiao struck with a level of speed and ferocity that none of these young guns have ever seen. Pacquiao continued to befuddle his younger and bigger foe, snapping his head back in the process. Then, old age hit, and Pacquiao failed to maintain the intensity from the earlier rounds. Now, Pacquiao still tried his best and even managed to hurt Thurman to the body. But he failed to maintain the intensity required to stop his younger foe. Now, one could say Pacquiao looked bad when you compare him to the ultra-high standard that he set during his prime. Realistically, he did very well for an older fighter, as he beat an undefeated and younger foe, who at one point had been the #1 welterweight in the world. The problem is that Spence is more durable than Thurman, and he showed no serious effects from his 2019 joyride. He also has better control of range, a stiffer jab, and better bodywork than Thurman. On the other hand, he's not as explosive as Thurman, and defensively he tends to rely on his feet and active guard to avoid damage. In 2017, Kell Brook was controlling the pace during much of their fight. In 2019, Sean Porter had him backing up, and in 2020, Danny Garcia's power had him weary of overcommitting. Chances are that the quick-handed Filipino will have him weary as well, especially in the early rounds, when he's at his most explosive. Another factor to consider is that Pacquiao is more experienced than Spence might ever be. He's seen it all, from master counterpunchers like Mayweather and Marquez to sluggers like Margarito and Rios. Spence, however, hasn't seen that many punchers in his career. Kell Brook was one, but he'd recently moved back down from middleweight after Triple G had broken his face. So it's fair to say that he was damaged goods. Garcia is the rare, durable puncher Spence has ever fought, and the Philadelphian managed to keep him honest with that power. In that fight, Spence took rounds 9 and 10 off, and although he upped his attack in the championship rounds, he still lacked the intensity shown in his fights against Brook and Porter. Another question is how Spence will deal with Pacquiao's speed. Although slower than in his prime, Pacquiao is still quicker than most fighters, even younger ones. And the problem for Spence is that his second line of defense, which involves him blocking shots, is likely to get him hit against Pacquiao's quick punches. Just look at how Porter, another explosive fighter, was able to do it. Like Mikey Garcia, a Spence victim, Porter is short for a welterweight, but he's more explosive and tenacious than the Californian, just like Pacquiao is. And he was able to cut the distance and strike with combos against Spence. And combination punching is Pacquiao's bread and butter. The fighters that tend to trouble Pacquiao are fighters who can keep their opponent turning. And although Spence has solid footwork, he tends to back up in straight lines, and his active guard is not quick enough to block every combination. The good news for Spence here, however, might be that at this stage in their careers, Pacquiao's pace is questionable, but even then, he can still crack hard with single shots. So Spence should be weary, just as he was against Danny Garcia. Moreover, if Spence couldn't stop little Mikey Garcia, then chances are that Pacquiao hears the final bell as well. So what do you think? Is an old Pacquiao good enough to beat Spence? Is his stamina good enough to resist Spence's attack? And does the Texan have the same conditioning that he displayed against Brook back in 2017? Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. Take it easy, folks. Thanks for watching.